Hello, my name is Dr. Russell Razzaque. I'm a psychiatrist, and in this video I'm going to talk about the authoritarian personality, the kind of personality construct that leads people to have a tendency towards following leaders who are of an authoritarian nature and who are likely to start to govern in ways that resemble a sort of dictatorship. What leads people to become like that? What leads people to develop personalities of an authoritarian nature? And then what we could do to work with people like that, and how we can maybe make a change to the trajectory that they might otherwise put the country on. Now, I'm going to also use this video as a bit of a sort of trailer for the channel too, because this is exactly the kind of subject I love to talk about and that we talk about a lot in this channel. The thing is that right now, because of what's happening in our politics and what's happening in our world, we are genuinely going through a global trauma. And all around the world, there are many of us who are experiencing what's happening in a very distressed state. And because of that, we're looking for answers, we're looking to try and understand what's going on, and that's what I try to do in this channel. The way that you can get more of these videos is by liking and subscribing to the channel, and also commenting on the videos as well. Because you see, this channel has turned into a sort of support place for people all around the world. What's wonderful is that people are sharing their experiences, generally talking about how what's happening is traumatizing them. And then we have other people who are responding to them with kindness and compassion and generally giving them space to be heard. This is why that makes this such a wonderful channel and a beautiful community that's growing around it. So please join our community and do subscribe to the channel. I'll also talk at the end of the video a bit more about how you can join the channel itself and become a member, get some more benefits that way. Also sign up to my e-newsletter, which is a way of making sure that we stay in touch in the long term, which you can do by following the link in the description. And also going to my bookstore called russellsbooks.com. I'll talk more about it at the end. But let's get back to the subject at hand, authoritarian personalities. Now, in 1950, as the world was looking back on the horror of World War II, a man called Theodore Adorno, a psychologist, started to think, what is it that led people to bring about World War II? What is it that led people to essentially bring in the kind of authoritarian leaders that led to the World War in the first place? Of course, as we know, democracy was dismantled and dictatorship was installed in a country that was originally democratic. People voted for this, in other words. So what led people to actually make the active step of bringing that about? It wasn't just one person who did this, it was a whole nation, in fact more than one nation, who went about to bring about an actual dictatorship in their country where they originally had a democracy. So what is it that leads people to do that? So Adorno was fascinated by this question, and almost as a kind of audit, a kind of post-mortem of the war and what led to it, he started to describe something that he called the authoritarian personality. Now, in very simple terms, an authoritarian personality is somebody who feels a deep need to follow authority, to follow strict rules and codes, who is not a fan of freedom in the sense that we know it, in terms of people making decisions about their own lives themselves, who is a strict believer in hierarchy and the vital importance of that. Now, there are much more details to the authoritarian personality that we can talk about, but what I want to really focus on today is what makes somebody into an authoritarian personality. Because what is clear is that what's happened in the States and what's led to Trump is a whole swathe of people, tens of millions of people, having the kind of relationship with authority that leads them to think that someone who themselves openly admits they're going to be a dictator from day one is someone who they actually find attractive. They're attracted to someone who tells them that they will strip away their democratic rights and lead them into an authoritarian future. What kind of person does that? Well, I've made other videos on trying to understand that, and today I'm going to try to understand it through the lens of the authoritarian personality. Now, what creates an authoritarian personality? What leads somebody to become that way? Well, as with almost all things in the psychological realm, this process starts in childhood, and it is actually all about child rearing. You see, anybody who works in mental health, any psychologist or psychiatrist will tell you that almost all of what creates the kind of adults we become starts in childhood, and is all about those first relationships that we form, those bonds that we form with our parents, the way in which we're raised. So what is it about child rearing that can lead to someone becoming an authoritarian personality? Well, there is actually a way to determine this. There's questionnaires that have been formed asking Very simple questions, in fact 4 simple questions that enable you to determine whether or not somebody is raising their child to become an authoritarian personality. So this scale has, as I say, been whittled down to some very simple questions. And if you ask parents these questions, then it gives you an idea about whether or not there is a propensity towards creating children who are more rather than less authoritarian. It's about the views that the parents has, their outlook on life, their perspective to their children, and what they should or shouldn't instill in them. Now, here are the 4 kind of dimensions we talk about. Parents are asked, what do you think is more important in a child? Curiosity or good manners? Being considerate or well-behaved? Independence or respect for elders? Self-reliance or obedience? So they're the 4 areas that we look at. Which of those 2 ends of the spectrum do you think is most important for children? Now the thing is, if you look at those criteria, in reality we all want some of those qualities on either side for our children. We want them to be able to be obedient sometimes, but also be self-reliant. We want them to be independent and also have respect for elders. We want them to be considerate and well-behaved, and we also want them to have curiosity as well as good manners. So on the face of it, it might feel like this questionnaire is a bit ridiculous, really. It's creating some false dichotomies. But that's exactly the thing, you see. These questionnaires deliberately create false dichotomies in order to force people into making a choice that they wouldn't ordinarily make. Because what would normally happen is that if you put it in a sort of scale from one side to the other and you ask people to mark where they fall in the scale, then they would tend to mark somewhere around the middle. But we're not asking that in this questionnaire. We're forcing people to say, which of these 2 do you prefer? And by forcing people to do that, you tend to get a sense of where their underlying tendencies lie and where their fundamental allegiance in terms of the characteristics they want for their children really lie. And so authoritarian personalities will tend to score on the side of obedience, respect for elders, being good-mannered and well-behaved. They will tend to answer those things consistently and value them far more than things like independence, self-reliance and curiosity. So that is how you can tell by asking those things whether or not a parent is likely to raise a child that is authoritarian. And interestingly, data has found that people who vote Democrat are a lot less likely to be authoritarian in terms of their personality structure. And people who vote Republican are a lot more likely to be authoritarian. Now this has changed in the last couple of decades because formerly the authoritarian versus more open personality structure was roughly evenly divided between the populations who voted for both parties, both Republican and Democrat. But now the authoritarians all tend to coalesce within the Republican camp and the non-authoritarians all tend to coalesce within the Democrat camp. And this has been a bit of a vicious cycle where you've had increasingly authoritarian leaders amongst Republicans who have also attracted increasingly authoritarian voters. And also, aside from the leaders, you've had increasingly authoritarian cultures within their media space. Look at Fox News, for example, which has again cultivated more authoritarian viewers who then in turn gravitate towards more authoritarian candidates, and that eventually led them to throw up Trump. What this means, of course, is that the problem is a lot deeper than Trump. Just Trump being out of the picture is not going to be enough. You see, at some point he will be out of the picture. I mean, he's in his late 70s already. And even if the Democrats manage to win the next election and the election after that, that mindset is still there. Those people and that culture is still going to remain. And so if it's not Trump in future, it'll be other people, authoritarian leaders. And the problem is that it only takes one of those leaders to bring democracy to a grinding halt. You only need to do it once. And then the rest of us become completely disenfranchised. And this is why what I argue for in this channel is that it's not good enough for us just to hope for a slightly better candidate to win the next election. What we need is a better system. So we don't just need a better candidate, we need a better system. And what can that better system be? Well, the thing is, there's such a thing as neuroplasticity, which is the fact that our brains are all able to rewire through the interactions that we have as we go through life. And so we can use this knowledge to change the trajectory of the people who are fixed on the notion of needing an authoritarian leader to rule over us all. And the way we can do that is by engagement, by interaction. And some of the problems we have right now is that the way social media works, the way that our popular culture works, is that people gravitate towards small bubbles, echo chambers, that just tell you what you want to hear and keep you in the lane that you want to stay in, keep you going on the path that you came from in the first place. And this is where our democratic system needs to actually involve in engaging between people. You see, there are participatory forms of democracy, like citizens' juries, for example, that bring people together to hear expert testimony and then start to debate the pros and cons of issues together. And those decisions are then fed into legislatures who then have to vote on the outcomes of these juries. Make a few tweaks if they need to, but essentially follow the findings of these citizen juries. So random selections of members of the public that are representative from a broad array of demographics and geographies to make sure that it's representative of the public as a whole, and people then start to engage. There are many different models of participation, and technology makes it easier these days. Using online platforms and AI, for example, to enable people to engage in a back and forth around policy, but based on testimony from experts, so that it can't get mired in conspiracy theories or misinformation. But then the decisions are made by the people who are engaging with each other. The problem with our system right now is that the only engagement that occurs between left and right is at the level of Congress or Parliament, depending on whichever country you're in. And by then it's already too late because things are too polarized for any compromises to be reached. So engaging in the political debate, engaging in the decision making itself needs to now be delegated to the people too. And that way, the process itself will lead to change in people's attitudes by hearing each other and also hearing from experts too, and lead us to create a system in which we're all participating on a regular basis. And that's the real way we can start to unpick some of what's happening at the moment. Otherwise, if we just wait and cast one vote every 4 years, we're going to be back here again, whether in the next cycle or the cycle afterwards, and eventually the whole thing will be shut down. It's one of the reasons I made this channel, because not only do I want to find ways to support us all through this global trauma we're experiencing, but I want to find solutions, and creating a democracy that is more participatory is a fundamental part of how we get out of this. So yes, the way we were brought up really matters. What happened in our childhood really matters. Our personality really matters, and all of that feeds into our politics. But the only way out of it is not just to change the candidates, but ultimately to change the system. I hope you liked the video. I hope you also can join me with more of my content that I'm aiming to make over the coming months and years. You see, this time around, what we're experiencing in this administration is a global trauma, and the people going through it have been asking, how can we support ourselves? How can we learn and grow and share together through this process? So I've started to write a series of ebooks. That's together with my whole team. Once a month, we're going to produce an ebook to help us understand better the psychology of the people around us and the systems we're in, as well as our own psychology too, to help us navigate this increasingly confusing and disorientating world we find ourselves in. You'll be able to find those books on russellsbooks.com. That's russellsbooks.com. As soon as you go there, you'll be able to see the growing catalogue of books and hopefully buy any of them at any point. In addition, I hope you can subscribe to my e-newsletter. See, there's a link in the description of this video and also the description of the channel. And if you go there, you'll be able to fill out a form. Once you've completed the form, you'll then be able to get subscribed to my e-newsletter. And that way you can always be kept up to date about the content I'm producing. You see, the fact is that this platform, as well as all platforms, are owned by a very small number of oligarchs. And at any point, they might decide to shut down a channel like this. And if they do that, then, well, it's going to be hard for us to keep connecting. So if you sign up for my e-newsletter, that way you'll be able to make sure that you'll be informed about my content wherever it's delivered and wherever it lands. Finally, I hope you might also consider becoming a member of the channel. If you do, you'll get these ebooks for free every month. So all the ebooks I produce go free to my members who join the channel every month. Also, you can get priority response to comments, and there's also a members only chat page for higher level members that we engage in regularly to sort of learn, share and support one another. As I say, this is a difficult time, it's a traumatic time in history, so many of us need support from each other. I'm hoping each of these things can help all of us create a better tomorrow together. Thank you.